In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Canva to efficiently do graphic design for your ministry so you can equip your church and enhance and grow the kingdom. Now, Canva is a really powerful and simple web-based tool. It's kind of like a simplified Photoshop on the web. And Canva is free, although there are some paid plans you can purchase, and I'm going to show you how to apply to get those plans for free as a nonprofit. And so, in addition to that, we're going to design these 3 graphics, which we're going to do in about 5 minutes for each graphic. So I know as a ministry professional, we have so many things that we're doing, a lot of hats that we are wearing, and graphic design is simply one of those things that can fall behind the wayside. Even though there are so many things, whether it's events, website banners, app design, social media, or Sunday morning slides that need to get done. And so being able to do those efficiently and quickly while still doing so with excellence is really important in ministry. And so we're going to do the nonprofit stuff, and then I'm going to show you how I design graphics quickly using a very simple philosophy. So let's get into it. Now I have a link down in the description, but you want to head over to the Canva for Nonprofits website, and then once you get there, you're going to go ahead and just click Apply. Now it is important to note you do need to be a registered 501c3. And we're going to go ahead and click Registered Nonprofit Organization. We're going to choose our country. And then we're going to search for our organization. So I'm going to search for my church. There it is. And we're just going to put our name in here. And then I already pulled the email address from my Canva account. And then we just need to click Submit. Now in the past, you actually had to write a little bit of an essay for Canva, and it looks like that's no longer required. In my experience, it typically takes about 1 to 2 weeks for Canva to approve your nonprofit plan, so just hang tight and you can continue to use either your free or paid account until that kicks over to the nonprofit plan. Now the nonprofit plan is really cool because it's essentially the professional plan, which gives you access to premium assets as well as some more premium features, and the big ones for churches really are the ability to invite team members to work on the same designs and have a similar style guide, which is amazing for volunteers. So with that being done, let's go ahead and create a graphic. Now, I want to start off by making a baptism slide graphic, and I'm going to use a philosophy I call text plus image. It's really that simple, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's go ahead and create our project. Now, if you're new to Canva, one of the things I want to point out here is there's a lot of really cool assets and templates right from here. You can see we have the option to create a YouTube banner. If you've never updated your YouTube banner, it definitely is a nice improvement and can just add to the overall excellence of your media just to have a banner in there. It could even be a photo. And what's cool about Canva is it gives you the dimensions in that template, so everything's going to fit as you intend it to. But we're going to go ahead and click Custom Size, and then we're going to do 1920 by 1080. And this will give us those 3 different sizes later on. Now that we have our blank canvas, we're going to head on over to Unsplash to grab some free images. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Unsplash, it's not to be confused with Subsplash, the church app and media platform. Unsplash is a place where we can find royalty-free content uploaded by artists that they're intending for us to use for free. Now, I don't recommend using any photos that have persons in them, as the copyright grounds on that can be a little bit iffy, but everything else you can use for free as long as you are not redistributing them or charging individuals to use those assets. But you can use it for any slide pretty much in your church or ministry organization. Okay, so I just spent a few minutes looking around and I found a photo that I really like. It looks like it's a sunset or a sunrise. We can see that the ocean is really deep and dark, and that just reminds me of iniquity and sin. And we can see that the sky is really quite beautiful and gold and blue. And I think this is going to be a great image to use. Now, the artist of this image is Joseph Barrentos, and I actually really like a lot of his work. And I didn't even realize it, but I've used a lot of his images before. So if you're looking for just a good artist on Unsplash, check him out. Now, I'm going to go ahead and grab the large file size just so I can manipulate the image and zoom in without losing quality. Now that has downloaded, we're going to head back over to Canva. And what's really cool about Canva is you can actually just drag and drop. So if I just grab this image, I can just drag it in here. And now it's been uploaded to my library, and I can just maneuver this however I need to. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to use these grid lines here to help me center it. Awesome. So now that we have our image, let's go ahead and grab some text. So we're going to come to the left-hand side, and we're going to choose a heading. And for this, we're going to go ahead and call it Baptism Sunday. We're going to make this a lot bigger. Now, when we are choosing font size, something to think about is the location that this media is going to be on. Is it going to be on a massive LED wall or projector screen, or is it something that someone might see on their phone, very small, or in a bulletin? So keep these things in mind, and you can actually design a singular graphic to work in all of them, but you just need to keep the parameters of where it's going to go in mind. And I would recommend for your first couple of designs, particularly if you're going to be showing them on something small, actually look at it at that resolution and see if it works. See if you struggle to read it. And if you have really good vision, maybe have someone who has poor vision take a look at it and see if you need to make things a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up a little bit, and let's find a nice font. Now, a good tip with fonts is to kind of think about the mood that you want to portray. If you're doing something that is a very historic, some topic such as Exodus, find a font that reminds you of something very ancient. But in the case of baptism, we want something, I think, modern, as baptism is a symbolism of rebirth. And so let's look for something a little more modern. For now, I'm going to go with Lapto, but some good fonts to go to when in doubt is Monostraat Classic and Babus New. Now, I do think Babus New is really overused in church world, but Monostraat is also a really nice font. Personally, I love the Ubuntu font as well, and you can't go wrong with Helvetica. Now, I'm actually going to go ahead and separate these and put them on separate lines here. And I have an idea I'm going to go ahead and play with. And we're going to go ahead and make this a lot bigger. Let's do 100. Let's do 120. Actually, let's do 110. Okay. Now, if you notice, this kind of looks like it's towards the bottom, and we're going to bring it up. And then let's go ahead and bring up our background image. So we're going to double click, going to bring this up here. Perfect, that's looking a lot better. Let's bring it down a little bit more. Now that we've gotten this graphic made, you may notice that the text doesn't really stand out that much, and there are two things we can do here. We can either add some boxes behind it, which is a nice strategy, and it gives us more things to play with. But in this case, I'm just going to click on the text. I'm going to go over to Effects, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a lift. We can also do a shadow, but in this case, I'm just going to do lift. And we can adjust the intensity of it. I'm going to do a lot of intensity because it really needs it on this design. Now, we can enhance this a little bit more, so we're going to go over to the Elements section. And you can see I've recently used this cross, and I did the search for cross. Let me just show you what comes up if we search for cross. Now, this is a really clean cross, but baptisms are generally not clean events. What I mean by that is they're sandy, there's water involved, and so this really kind of feels cold and not fitting for the event. We also have a very clean and modern font, and so we don't want to overdo it. So let's look for a little more rugged cross. I like this one right here. And as you can see, this is a pro asset, so we do need a Canva Pro or nonprofit. Now, I don't like the black, but we can change the color. We'll go and make that a nice white. A nice tip here when it comes to adding elements is symmetry. Now, we're going to make this cross a little bit smaller so that the top and the bottom of the cross align with the top and bottom of the text. Now, we do have grid lines, but as you can see, they're not always accurate. And this is actually an interesting idea in design where we will make things intentionally inaccurate, or intentionally out of alignment, but they'll actually look more in alignment. And you can actually see this with the Google logo. The G is all messed up. Move this a little bit closer. And now we're going to grab both of these elements and we're going to center them on the graphic. But again, as you can see, it kind of looks a little bit too far to the right, even though it is technically center. So we're going to grab it and we're just going to go a little bit to the left, even if that is technically a little bit out of alignment. Now, as you can see, we have a really clean and simple graphic, and it only took us a couple of minutes to make. Now, you're probably wondering, where's the other information? You didn't add a date or a time or information on where to sign up. And you're right, I didn't. And that was intentional. Now, you can add those things. I recommend you can add them at the bottom, underneath. You can make the baptism a little bit smaller so they're still in alignment with the cross and have it as a subtext. But if you are completely slammed and you just simply don't have time to do web design or graphics and other things in the ministry are suffering, I want to give you permission. you don't have to add those details. In fact, without adding those details, it means that we don't need to edit this graphic until it really goes out of style. So we can continue to use this singular graphic that took us less than 5 minutes to make any day of the week for months to come. And so if you have the bandwidth and the time, go ahead and add those dates to the graphic. But one of the things that we all know is that in church world, sometimes we're not the most organized and dates change. And there's nothing like, oh, ignore the slide, the date's wrong on a Sunday morning. And so in an effort to avoid that, it's okay to not put the time and the date, especially if it's being paired with something else, such as a calendar event in your app, website, or someone talking about the event on a Sunday morning. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this graphic is going to work on 3 different types of media: banner, square, and 16 by 9. Now the way that we do this is that we're going to make sure that the text and the icon, in this case the cross, is not cut off. However, the image itself will be cut off on those various forms of media. And so to make sure that the text and the cross fit within all of those, I have a guide that I've made and uploaded to my Canva account. Now I have a copy of this down in the description so you can use it for yourself. Now if you guys use Subsplash to build out your apps, what's really cool about this guide is this is those 3 sizes. It's the banner, the square, and the 16 by 9 artwork that you'll find in all of the artwork sections of your app. And so I have this guide right here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to drag it in, and you can see that it actually replaces the image because I'm dragging it in as the backdrop. And if you're wondering why it's flashing, when I take it near the corner, it offers to replace. If I drag it to the middle, it's going to add it on top. So we'll go ahead and drag it there. And as you can see, this works. The Baptism Sunday text is right here. We can see our shadow right there, and it fits on all 3 different sizes. Here's the banner, here is the square, and the rectangle, or the 16 by 9 is of course the entire image. Now, this did replace the actual artwork, so we need just to go ahead and click the back button in the upper left-hand corner here, or we can do Command-Z on Mac or Control-Z on Windows. That's it. Our design is done. But before we export this slide, I want to make sure that we name it to stay well organized so that when we go into our Canva library in the future, maybe it's months or even years later, we can search and find all of the baptismal graphics we've made, as I imagine this one won't be your last. And so if we go to the upper left-hand corner and click on File, we can see that I already named it from the main title. But if for whatever reason we needed to change that name, we could do so there. Another thing I want to point out, especially if you're new to Canva, is you can actually duplicate slides by clicking on the upper right-hand corner of the image here and clicking Duplicate Page. Now what's really cool about this is if you have a design that you really like, but you want to really try heavily experimenting with it, you can duplicate the page so that you can really experiment with one copy of it without messing up the other one in case you're going down the wrong creative path. And when you do this, you notice that we have the option to name the page right here. And so I'm just going to say Option 2. Another really good tip is if you do want to add the dates to the slides, maybe have a backup slide with a no date on it. That way, when the inevitable change happens and the dates get moved or the time changes, well, you can just default back to the slide with a no date without having to go and scramble on a Sunday morning or right before an event launch to update the information. So with that being done though, we can go ahead and delete this second page as it's not necessary, and then share this graphic with the world. And now, one of the really nice things about Canva, unlike Photoshop or even Illustrator, is that we can actually scale up the graphic right here, and it will automatically scale all of the assets as high as it can go. But the text and other assets that we use will be scaled up proportionally. But for this, I'm just going to choose 1920 by 1080, and we're going to go ahead and download that image as a PNG. And there it is. We have our Baptism Sunday graphic we can use anywhere. And again, if you're using Subsplash for apps, one of the really nice things, this will work on all 3 of those sizes: banner, square, and 16 by 9. But even if you're not using Subsplash, or this is not going into your app, those sizes are kind of rough estimates of the different types of media that we'll use, whether it's a square graphic for like a bulletin or something like that, a banner for our Sunday morning slides or out in the lobby, or a 16 by 9 graphic just for standard distribution or pre-service slides. So now with the baptism slide, let's go ahead and do another one. For this, let's do a sermon series graphic, which, to be honest, is one of the way more difficult graphics to do, as you want to make each one kind of look different. And so for this, let's pick Proverbs. Well, Proverbs is an interesting book because it is the book of wisdom. And so when we think about wisdom, what do we think about? I think about books. I think about ancient times, as if it truly is proper wisdom, it was applicable 2,000 years ago and today. I think about study. And so let's go find an image that would be fitting for Proverbs. So with that, let's head back to Unsplash and look. Now when you're in Unsplash, you can actually just search for the words you're looking for. So in this case, we can just search for Proverbs. I may see some scripture, some books here. We can also search more abstractly. So we can look for books. We can also search for wisdom. We can try education as well. History. Awesome. I think I found an interesting photo here. Now this is just a photo of maps, and I actually found this by searching for a stack of books on a table, but it ended up coming up. And I think this might be a fitting graphic, as the book of Proverbs really is guidance from a father to his son on direction in life. And so maybe that could be our subtitle, Proverbs, Finding Direction in a Chaotic World. And so we're going to use that for our graphic. And one of the things I want to throw into here, if you have a camera and you're starting to do your own photography, you can totally use those images. In fact, it's preferred, especially as you build up a high-quality library of high-quality assets. So we're going to go ahead and download this in the highest quality. And then while that's downloading, let's head back over to Canva, and we're going to make a new file. And again, we're going to do 1920 by 1080. Awesome. Now that we got our image downloaded, we're going to go ahead and drag it in here. And as you can see, it still is uploading, but we have a preview of it. And let's just go ahead and bring it here. Now because this is a sermon series graphic, it will not need to work on the square size, which gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of design. Let's go ahead and grab a title. We're going to do Proverbs. And let's find a more traditional looking font. Make this much bigger. I'm liking the direction we're going. Let's throw a shadow behind there. What do we want to do? Here's what I was talking about earlier, doing a background, but that doesn't really work for this. So let's do lift again, and we're going to make it quite intense as we kind of need it. Let's also play with the color here. What happens if we make this graphic black? As it is kind of on a pretty bright background. That doesn't really work. Let's see what else we can do to make this pop a little bit more. Make it a pinch bigger. Let's give it a slight outline. Not a big fan of outlines. Let's try. Not a big fan of outlines. Let's try something else. Let's do a lift and a shadow. And I'm going to make it a little bit more blurry. And we're just going to play with the transparency. And it doesn't look like I've done anything, but just by adding a little bit of lift and playing with the shadow variables, this pops out a lot. Now we're actually going to go ahead and duplicate this title and use it for the subtitle. So let's make this a good amount smaller. And let's think of a good subtitle for this. Now for the subtitle, it doesn't really stand out as much, so we're going to go ahead and make it black. And that also doesn't really help, so let's actually go back into effects and play with the variables here. That helps. And we can also play with making the entire subtitle fully capitalized. And that certainly helps. Let's make this a pinch smaller. Now, one of the design strategies we can do that we used earlier is to make sure everything aligns. So we're going to line this up, and then we're going to make this smaller. And we're going to change this to world, actually. Chaotic. Now, punctuation is up to you. I think I'm going to leave it there. It kind of looks classy. Bring this down a little bit. Now that's looking pretty good, but I want to get this text to pop just a little bit more. And so we're going to go back to shadow, and we are going to adjust these settings just a little bit more to see what we can do to get it to pop a little bit. Let's try playing with the color. Another thing we can do is play with the image itself. Let's look at some of these filters we have. Oh, that looks really good. Again, that's really optional. You don't have to do that, but just adds a little bit of character to the image. But now this text is looking a little too clean. Let's play with the color and just make it a pinch more grungy. Just a pinch. Nice. And let's take this entire graphic, and I'm just using Shift and click to select both of them, and make it all just a little bit bigger. And this will help us with making it a little bigger will also help us with reading it. Drag it up a little bit. Again, that's not technically aligned, but we want to have a little bit more room in the bottom. That really makes things look even. And so we have our Proverbs graphic. A couple things we can do to add some style to it. If we go back over to actually, I like white better on this graphic. Now let's actually try something. I know I said earlier that I don't want to do a background for this type of image, but what we can actually do is bring down the transparency a little bit, and that gives us a little more of a subtle backdrop there. And I think that actually works and makes it stand out and be a little bit more readable. And there's our graphic, and we really could export this right now, but if we want to enhance it a little bit more, we could add some iconography to it. So let's go ahead and head over to Elements and search for a compass. And this looks really cool, and we could absolutely use something like that. So let's go ahead and shrink this up. And put that compass right there. And actually, I want to try a different compass. I think this one will look a little bit better. Make this white. And make sure we center it. Now to check it, we're going to go ahead and use our guide. And as you can see, the compass is being cut off here. So what we're going to need to do is remove the guide. So I'm going to do Command Z. And let's just bring everything down just a few pinches here. And we'll bring our guide back in. Compass needs to come out just a pinch more, or we can also shrink it as well. Guide comes back in, and we can see that it is not cutting off. So that works right there. Now, I'll admit, this is not my favorite Proverbs graphic. I've designed ones that I think look a little bit better, but you can see just how quickly we can get a sermon series graphic designed when we use the simple philosophy of image plus text. In this case, we added a single icon, which don't know if I like it or not, but added a little bit more creativity to the image itself. And as you get more experience with this, you can add more and more detail into your designs. But in the beginning, I strongly suggest don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple, especially if you are new into the art of design, because it is absolutely an art and discipline. And so with that, let's go ahead and export this graphic. And again, we're going to do a PNG. Awesome, there's our graphic. Now, before we actually put this up on a Sunday morning, I definitely recommend you making it a doctrine in your church, or as close to a doctrine as you can get without something being scriptural, that someone reviews all graphics before they go public. We are all human, we are all fallen short of the glory of God, and because of that, we will make mistakes. And one of the challenges when it comes to typos is your brain is going to suggest to you what should be there, even if it isn't. And so always have someone else proof your work before you publish it. So with that, let's go ahead and make one more graphic, and this time we're going to do a very simple give slide that's intended to be used in your mobile app. So let's do it. Now let's go ahead and make a new Canva project, and I'm going to call this one give, and we're going to do that exact same size, 1920 by 1080. I'm going to close these other tabs to clean things up. And one of the things I want to point out here is we actually do have some other assets given to us by Canva, and so do play around with those and see what you think. But in general, I think a lot of them are kind of a little bit overcomplicated. And so let's head back to Unsplash, and let's just search for give. Now, one of the things I want to call out here is if you find an image that looks really good, but you've seen it before, try to steer away from that, because if you've seen it, odds are those observing it have seen it, and it can be tiring to see the same image on a lot of different assets. And so try to find more complex searches as you go along the way, but start off simple. We see we have a give search we've done right here, and we got a couple options here. In this case, I actually really like this image, and I do think it's a bit overused, but let's go ahead and grab it. Now that we've got our image, let's go ahead and drag it into Canva. Now this one we're going to make it really simple, and I'm going to try to do this entire design in under 60 seconds. So let's see if we can do it. Let's go ahead and go over to text. I'm going to grab a heading. I'm going to make it really simple. Give. We're going to make it bold. We're going to make it white. I'm actually going to make it black to correspond with the background. We're going to use Monostrack Classic. We're going to give it a size of 100. We're going to make it even bigger. And we're actually going to not center it. We're going to put it right here. And I actually want to see what white looks like. Let's do white or black. Let's do black, but we are going to change the font. And let's go with Alice. No, let's go with Afra. I like that. Looks good here. Let's just go ahead and click on it, and we're going to go back to effects, and let's actually give it a backdrop here. And let's play with, let's do white, and we'll make the roundness a little bit less aggressive, and the spread we'll do right about like so. You know what? I'm really not liking how this is turning out. So let's head back over to Unsplash and look for a new image. Now, when you think about giving, here's a question. Why should someone give to your church? What's the reason? Yes, we got to pay the bills, we have to keep the lights on, but fundamentally, what should the money be doing? And the answer is, it should be proclaiming and advancing the gospel. And so that's one of two ways. That is growth in numbers and growth in terms of the spiritual maturity of our members. And so when we think about that, how could we symbolize that? Well, one would be a new beginning. And so let's think about something in nature that would be quite beautiful and that would work for that. So You know what? Here's a really nice, simple photo, and I just found this by searching for beginning. So let's go ahead and download this image. And we're going to go back to our project, and we're simply going to delete this image. We're going to drag the new one in. Let's go ahead and go back to effects, and let's throw in some transparency to this background here. We're going to click on the text again, and let's apply a little bit of a lift to the text itself, or a little bit of a shadow rather. And we want to make sure we get our background back in there. Now it's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and just play with the font real quick. This is the font I think I'm going to land on. Let's just go ahead and make it bold and then make any adjustments we need to. So I'm also going to change this to say giving. Now is it just me, or does this image feel a little bit empty? Let's fix that. We're going to go over to our elements section and let's search for a present. Now I like this one right here, so let's go ahead and drag this in. And I want to make this white so that it matches our text. Make it a little bit smaller. Looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and take both of these, bring them down a little bit. And let's actually go back to give. Something's not quite right. I have an idea here. Let's go back to elements and let's search for a heart. I want a heart with an outline. That looks pretty good. Let's make that white. Although this one will match our style a little bit better. We're going to add another heading here. I'm just going to do a plus symbol. And you probably already know where I'm heading with this. Just going to kind of click around until I find a font that I like that. Make it a little bit closer. Perfect. That's looking pretty good. And let's make this giving again. Or we could do give now as well, but let's just play with this. Let's center this on the image itself and move this here. That's looking pretty good. Make this a pinch smaller. And let's play with these effects a little bit again. Let's go back to full. That's looking closer. I'm going to shift select everything. a little too far down. I'm going to shrink this up a little bit. And that's looking pretty good. I'm going to change this to a little bit of a smaller plus button. I think we almost have it. Let's just go ahead and shift select all of our items and bring them up just a pinch. Now that's looking pretty good for just a couple minutes of editing. Now clearly it's not 60 seconds, but this is the third graphic I've designed consecutively. And one of the things that I really recommend when you're doing a lot of graphics is go for a walk, take breaks, and look at your designs the next day. You may love them in the moment and hate them tomorrow, or you may hate them in the moment and find out that they're actually really awesome tomorrow. Now one more step before we download this image, let's just go back to our Uploads menu, grab our template, and as you can see, everything fits neatly within it, and that's especially important as we are intending to use this one on the app. We're going to hit the back button there. Now we can go ahead and download our graphic as a PNG. That's it. We just designed 3 simple graphics, and more importantly, we did it efficiently and quickly. Now, I'm going to include links to all these assets we made down in the description below, along with some others that I've made in the past for you to use in your churches and ministries. It's completely free. The only thing that I ask is you don't redistribute or sell any of my work. I'm also going to include the grid lines so you can make sure that your text and icons align appropriately so you can use a single graphic on 3 different media forms. Now, if this is the first time you're doing graphic design or using Canva, or even if you have a little bit of experience, what I did might look a little bit like magic considering we did it so quickly. But it's like with anything. A little bit of practice goes a long way. And so the first time you design even a simple graphic, expect it to take up to an hour. But as you become more efficient, both with the tools and your own creative ability, you will be able to design graphics as quickly as I did. Now, I want to be clear. I am not a graphic designer. I have dabbled in graphic design. And so if your role is in creative arts or communications, you should be well ahead of where I am within a few months of practice, training, and hearing honest criticism from those around you. So I hope these assets bless you and your church. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below and I will do my best to answer them. Bye for now, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week.